Okay, everybody, welcome to the One Thing webinar. Super excited to cover wealth building in this edition with our guest and my special friend, Ben Kinney. He is a super individual. So I'm gonna give you the overview if you've not joined one of these webinars, kind of how it works. We have about an hour today. The first 5 or 6 minutes, in our research, about 20% of the people who log in have not read the One Thing book. So I'll give you kind of the elevator pitch. What are the big ideas? I know Ben's read it many times, and if we start talking about dominoes and all that, you'll know what we're talking about. So we'll give you the big idea. And then as quickly as I can, I'm going to introduce Ben Kinney, tell you a little bit about why we invited him to be a part of our webinar series, what he has to offer on wealth building in particular. And then we'll have a great interview. I've got some questions prepared for him. We talked about some areas that are huge strengths for Ben Kinney that he can share for you. He's playing this game at a really high level, but he's a great teacher, and I know that he's going to help me bring it down so that if you're just beginning your journey, you'll be able to take away some great information. I mean, I can't tell you how I'm excited. I love talking about wealth building. It's probably my favorite subject. On the screen right now, you can see our social handles, at Jay Papasan, at Ben Kinney, at The One Thing Book. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter, especially for Ben Kinney. You can find me on Facebook as well. But if you want to reach out to us, those are great channels, and we'll show those to you again. And obviously, there's our website. You can check in with us there if you have anything else. So let me tell you a little bit about Ben Kinney and why we chose him for this One Thing broadcast on wealth building. So his bio is amazing for someone who's just in their mid-30s. After only 10 years in real estate, Kinney now owns and operates one of the top 25 producing real estate teams in the country from all brands, not just Keller Williams, where he's located. He also owns and operates multiple Keller Williams Realty franchises that include 800 plus agents across 7 locations, servicing 6 counties. Ben is a nationally recognized trainer and speaker. In the last few years, he's personally trained over 100,000 business owners via conferences, classes, and webinars. Ben is ranked by the Wall Street Journal and Real Trends as one of the top 100 real estate agents for both units sold and total sales volume in the nation by selling over 500 homes and $100 million in real estate from 2010 to 2014, and I'm sure he's going to blow through that in 2015. Recently, Ben was named Inman News 2014 Innovator of the Year for his work in real estate and technology, specifically by founding and creating Brivity and Blosser, 2 amazing technologies that I know will come out. Previously, Ben was named by Inman as one of the 100 most influential people in real estate as well. And all this before he's really turned the corner on his mid-30s. He's had an extraordinary career. And if you didn't catch all of that, great real estate agent, built a great real estate team. He owns real estate businesses. He also does real estate investing. And most recently, he's a technologist. He's launched multiple technology companies. So we'll be kind of looking through all of these channels he's used to build his wealth and some of the keys to get there. And I'm just going to add one thing to the bio since he's mute. He's also the second best fisherman when I'm on the boat with him, and I'm sure he'll enjoy hearing that. So enough there. I'm going to now talk a little bit about the One Thing. The One Thing book, if you had to boil it down, what is the big idea that's driving the book? It's Pareto's principle. That idea that the majority of your results, 80% in most cases, comes from the minority of what you do. So 20% of what you do gives you 80% of the results you want. The business people that understand that this at the highest level absolutely get the best results because they focus on that 20% all day long, early and often. The idea behind the One Thing is that we want you to not just focus on the 20%, but what's the 20% of the 20%? What's the one thing that gets you the most results? And so that's a big part of the idea. And if you're able to capture that, there's a promise. And this is where the domino metaphor comes in. It's this idea of creating a domino run. I'm sure everybody on this webinar at some point in their lives has lined up dominoes so they can knock them all down, right? So the biggest objection that Gary, my co-author, and I had when we were writing the book called The One Thing is all these busy people will say, it's never just one thing, Gary. It's never just one thing, Jay. There's all this other stuff that we have to attend to. Our point was there is a practical way to line up your dominoes. so that as often as possible, when you do the first one, a lot of the other stuff just gets taken care of. And we did some research, and just for geeking out on the metaphor of a domino run in your life, which is what we want you to create using the book, it's almost 5 million, 4.9 million dominoes were lined up in the Netherlands and been knocked over. So one thing can make 4.9 million other things happen if they're lined up correctly. And as you can see on the screen, there was a physicist who determined that a domino can actually knock over one that's 50% bigger. So one domino can knock over something that's bigger, and then something that's bigger, and so on. And it can go on to infinity. So not only can one thing properly lined up do more, it can also do a lot bigger things, right, progressively. And it's called a geometric progression. And this is one of probably the most referenced images in our book. And it's the idea that if you lined up dominoes that were getting 50% bigger, starting with just a 2-inch domino, your geometric progression by the 18th domino would be taller than the Tower of Pisa. The domino, that 2-inch domino, would be knocking over, by the time it got to 23, would be over the Eiffel Tower. And what kind of blows my mind is just 31 dominoes into that run, growing at that same rate, the domino you could knock over with your first 2-inch domino would be 3,000 feet above Everest. By the 57th, it would almost bridge the gap between the Earth and the Moon. Now, that's cool, and it gets you this idea of compound interest, right? This is a financial webinar. You can start with a small amount, but if it's compounding at a regular amount, over time, it's like the 8th wonder of the world. I think that's actually a bad quote from Bill Gates, where he called it that compound interest was one of the wonders of the world, because it just surprises people how big your money can get over time if you just work it consistently. I'll point out one other thing. When we studied success in all kinds of arenas, it looks like a hockey stick on its side, right? This line, this progression, when you graph it out. This is kind of the shape of success. No matter what your endeavor, things look like nothing's happening, right, in the beginning until it explodes and happens faster than most people would expect. I would tell you from a personal journey, I would imagine that Ben is going to collaborate on this as well, corroborate on this as well, that's the shape of most people's financial trajectory. You're doing the right things, right? You're living on less than you earn. You're investing the difference. And in the beginning, it doesn't feel like you're making a lot of progress until suddenly you do. So I say that to give people who might be kind of stuck in the middle and not sure that they're getting results, that is the shape of big success, and you need to stick with it. Hopefully you'll pick up some tricks today that will help you accelerate that journey so you can get to the right side of the graph faster. One of the other big principles that we talk about is the power of habit. When you've identified your first domino, your one thing, one of the big takeaways from the book is we want you to then make that one thing a habit. So if there's a financial habit that comes out of our discussion today, hopefully you'll consider saying, well, goodness gracious, that's something I need to do every day, right? This is something I need to make a habit. And contrary to a lot of self-help books out there, habits don't form in 21 days or 30 days. On average, it takes 66 days to form a habit. So through repetition over time, it gets easier and easier to do that thing. So today, when I think about the book and the application, one of the most common reasons I go into companies to teach the book is so that people can identify their one thing in whatever endeavor they are, and then help make that systematic, make it a habit. So that it just happens automatically, right? They work for the habit, and then the habit works for them. That's how success starts to look really amazing for people. So that's the big idea. In the book, it's the reason we're going to finances, we actually addressed the several areas in your life that you would ask, what's my one thing? And you can see it on your screen right now, the focusing question. What's the one thing I can do, in this case for my finances, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and necessary? Now, last year, if you attended our webinar, I talked about tracking your net worth. And I know that my friend Ben Kinney had made a habit of that very early, right? He would do his budget, he'd do his investing, he would track the one number that mattered. Today, we're going to take a step beyond that. We're going to really talk about wealth building beyond that first initial habit. You can go back and watch that original webinar if you want to hear more about that nitty-gritty thing, but we're going to talk about wealth building on an even bigger level today with Ben Kinney. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Ben if he would be kind enough to unmute himself so that we can just kind of dive in and start talking about his wealth building journey. Ben, are you there?
Hey Jay, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Welcome to the One Thing webinar. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Hey, I'm super excited. One, because you're a friend, and two, because this is one of the books that helped change my direction in my life. So thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. So, I gave you that big introduction. I'd love to kind of go back to the beginning and tell folks a little bit. I think a lot of people see you on stage now. They read about you in Inman News or the Wall Street Journal, and they think of you as this venture capitalist, investor, whatever. But you actually come from very humble beginnings. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up? I mean, you just grew up in rural Washington. You want to tell people a little bit about how you got started down your path?
Well, I think the shortest version is, I came from a world that most of the callers on the call here, that we didn't come from wealth. I was raised in a cabin that was, 287 square feet or so, and had a drug and alcohol problem with my parents, and we relied on the food bank and or going hungry, and that that sets you up with a path that most people get on to say, I can't have anything because nobody around me has ever had anything, and I see my family members sometimes taking that path, and I just always took the other way because we never had anything. I'm not going to be repeating the same path that my family walked. So it wasn't easy growing up, but it makes you who you are, and I wouldn't change it for any other way.
I love that because I think a lot of people, I think that when they see a successful person, like you said, they assume that they were handed things. And I don't know that people appreciate that, you had to start at ground zero, right? You didn't start off with a silver spoon. You didn't start off with a tailwind. You had to start off and fend for yourself. Now, your first job out of college, you were selling cable TV, right?
I was an installer for cable through college. That's how I paid for college since we couldn't get any loans. So I had to, wake up in the morning, install cable, try to sell some cable so I could install it again. I got paid by the job, and that's how I paid for college. Funny enough, Jay, that's how I met this lady that owned a duplex that told me that she lived in one side of this property and the tenants in the other side paid her entire mortgage. And this idea that somebody could live for free in a nice home just blew my mind away, and that's what actually started me down the path from leaving the corporate jobs into considering real estate, because I wanted to own a duplex. I wanted to live for free.
So the path starts for you, like, so you have a job, you're earning income, you hear about this thing. And I think for a lot of people who've never looked hard, and they might be renters themselves, but they haven't considered the fact that they're paying someone else's mortgage. Like, you got that and said, I want to go get it. So I want to, I'm trying to start from the beginning here because I've experienced a lot of your journey. It starts with that very open access that anybody can start down the path in real estate. Now, I'm going to contrast it with that with a conversation we had recently driving out to go hunting. And you had encouraged me to talk to Gary, my co-author, about adding a chapter to one of our books called Give a Million. And today, right, that first insight into real estate, and we can go back and talk more about that, to today, you have a huge vision. And this is one of the main reasons I wanted you here, to build your wealth so much that you could actually give $1 million away a year. Can you share kind of like, I mean, that's a giant leap in just really about 15 years. Were you always thinking that big and it just took you that long to articulate it, or has it been something that's progressively been growing within you?
Well, got to have lunch today with a friend, and he said, did you always think that you could do X or Y or Z? And my answer was, I never thought that the opportunities that I have this year would have been present even last year,
Hmm.
because what I know that as I walk down the path, additional doors open. And the further I walk, the more doors open and the more opportunities that I have. So even when selling real estate, the idea of selling 25 was impossible until I did it. But once I sold 25, 75 was tangible. 150 was doable after I sold 75. It just kept growing. And reading the book, your guys' book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, about making $1 million was unfathomable. My combined family income from growing up, what my family made was probably $30,000 or $40,000. The idea of making six figures was unfathomable till you do it. And then once you make a million, you got to decide that, hey, making it's for your ego, netting it's for your business, and then you have to net a million. And once you net it, there isn't many things that you can't own once you're making and netting $1 million. You can have any car you want or go anywhere you want. There's a certain amount that it becomes not a driving force. So what you have to do is you have to find some other fuel for the fire. And what I love doing is I love helping people get the most out of their life and helping people that might have been in bad situations see a way out of it. And the only way to do that is to give money away. And the more I make, the more I can give away, which is why I put so much pressure on making more money, because I want to give more away. And one of the benefits of giving money away, Jay, I think, is that if you can show people how to give, the greatest contributions you could have in the community is teaching other people how to give, because the amount of money you and I can give away is fixed. But if we could teach 1,000 people on this call today to give away 10,000 a year, 100,000 a year, I mean, mathematically do that math and tell me how big that is, Jay. It's huge. So we got to set this vision of being an example for giving money away, and I wanted to pick a big number and a number that would match the number that you guys gave me on netting $1 million, and I wanted to match it to give it. And I think we're well on the path of doing that annually.
I love that. I love that. I love the big thinking, and I love that a lot of people get there sooner or later. I've had the privilege to interview a lot of wealthy people, and in the beginning, it may have been driven by baser needs. Maybe they wanted to go get a yacht or a big mansion or show off to folks. And I'm not implying that those were any of your motivations, Ben, but I've seen it start there. But when people really start to grow their wealth, they start looking for a bigger legacy, a bigger meaning to attach to it, or they just drop out. They just sell and go retire to the countryside in Europe. But the ones who keep working tend to be driven by a much, much bigger vision. And a lot of times it's got generosity attached to it. So I just want to, pause right now and commend you for getting there quickly. And also now you're just motivated, not by greed, but by giving to build wealth at an even faster rate. So I definitely believe in this lever that we have right here today. We've got close to 1,000 people that we have the opportunity to hopefully raise the bar on how they think about giving, and then instruct them on how they can build wealth so they can give more of it away. It's kind of like a 2 times multiplier, right? How many people times the people you change their mindset times the time you empower them to build wealth can you have an impact? So let's let that be our one thing today. Is that cool with you?
That's awesome.
Cool.
I remember, I remember learning how to give, and I got a friend at International called Kathy Nye. I call her Mother because she yells at me a lot. And one of the things that she inspired me to do was to give small often. So what I did is I said, I'm going to give a nominal amount of money, $50 every time I sell a house. And when you do that over 25, 100 homes, it doesn't equate to very much. But if you never change that amount and you keep on selling more, over time, this starts amassing a lot of giving that doesn't even feel like it hurts. So when you're thinking about giving, think about how do you chip away at it in small amounts frequently, just like you do it at church or wherever you go that you like to give a little bit. It amasses over time.
And I love that advice from Kathy. And just so you know, she probably wasn't yelling at you. I think she just yells naturally. I'm laughing because she offices right next door to me. So she, great advice, because you're also building a habit of giving. And, I have, my wife did exactly what you did, and probably did it based on some conversation y'all had where she started giving away, I think it was $25 for every closing or 50, and kind of shocked her when she found out that for that charity, she was in the top 10, but she had stopped tracking. And one of the things that I remember thinking is, it's like your 401k. When you start a 401k program, the first paycheck you see that you're minus $100 or you're minus $50. But after that, whatever you normally get after you've invested becomes the normal. And so you can give that same way too. It's just by making it a habit, whatever's left over after investing, after giving, that becomes your normal amount to live on.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is saving money and giving money both happen incrementally, and they all start out small. And I mean, don't wait till you can give a lot, or don't wait till you can save a lot. Start now with a little, and just be surprised. How in the MREA book it talked about that compounding penny.
Yeah.
what that would look like in 30 days. If you doubled a penny every day for 30 days, what would it actually be like? And, I kind of feel like that in my life. I went through this path of building this business and then adding other businesses. And now all of a sudden I'm looking up, and the compounding result of the net income that we have to invest in new opportunities or give or hire is phenomenal. And I'm so excited about what it's going to look like next year.
That's so cool. Yeah, and it's I think the penny, just for if you haven't read that section of the Millionaire Investor, it's an old story that I can't even remember where we found it. But if you double a penny every day, I think by the 30th day, it's over 10 million. That compounding, just like the domino run, it's staggering how those little tiny contributions that you allow to grow over time, you look up and suddenly they're huge.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, Ben, when we were chatting before it, so I gave us a little cheat sheet. There was this idea that in wealth building, if you're driven by giving, right? So if one of the reasons your first priority is to give, um, investing in the world or the world around you and helping others, that you kind of identified that there were two other things that just by necessity to kind of think that big, to give a million, you're going to have to invest in people and over time, businesses and real estate. And that's a big category because you've done a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit about how investing in people kind of logically follows this idea of thinking big about giving?
Yeah, well, one of the goals that I set forth, and I had an opportunity to sit down and create some goals with my coach. And one of the things I came up with was I wanted to help 10 people become millionaires. And when you have a goal of giving your time and business and energy to helping other people make $1 million a year, the end outcome actually ends up being that you're going to be making 10 million a year or even more. So naturally, by giving, your income grows. But what I learned was that, in these situations, that you can either spend your time doing the stuff, and I call that being so busy that you actually never have time to be successful, or you can spend your time finding the best people that are willing to do the stuff. And the quote we came up with is, when you make your life about the who instead of the what, your 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 potential becomes unlimited. So I could spend all day trying to go get another transaction or sell another widget in my business, and I could go through the phone book to try to find somebody to buy that widget or to do that transaction, etc. Or I could take the same amount of time with the same phone book and go through that phone book trying to find one person that was willing to go through the phone book every single day trying to sell that one widget or do that one specific transaction, and which one of those two tasks would pay me more. If I made my life about finding talent and then I gave enough of my time and my heart and my money and my opportunities that they never left me, wow, would my potential change. I could have logarithmic, exponential growth. I'd be hitting the moon with my domino if I did that. So when you make your life about finding people, you got to find processes to find people and know what real talent really looks like.
So, I mean, I think I'm just going to sit down because I've had a chance to work with so many salespeople and so many business people, and they miss this. It's so easy to miss how, I mean, I think actually investing in yourself and investing in people are like the highest rates of return that you can get for your money anywhere. And it takes time to go look for people. You have to leave other things unattended. And so few people, even if they intellectually get it, they aren't able to implement. What would you coach those people who maybe have the beginnings of a business or the beginnings of an idea and they really need to make that investment in that first person? Where would you start?
I don't know about you guys on the call, but if you guys have ever like tried to lose weight or do something drastic in your life, sometimes you guys have maybe tried this. You see it on TV. It's called the no food diet, where you decide that you have to lose weight, so you eat no food for 30, 60, whatever, hours or days, whatever you can last. And then all of a sudden, once you're done with the no food diet, you go on the all food diet and you eat as much as you can. And you're actually heavier than you were before. And it's because these extreme things, stopping what you're doing now, is actually not practical in your business for you to survive. So what you got to do is you got to just chunk it up into little tiny digestible bites. So I'd say if you're, Gary would tell you, if you're having a issue in your personal life, in your spiritual life, in your financial life, in your business life, those things, you're missing one key relationship. Once you realize that that's your problem, what you got to do is you got to commit 10 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, and that's all you do. one of the most important people in my life and my business is Jolene, and what she does, she has this hourglass on her desk, and it has 30 minutes of sand in it, and she flips it over twice a day, and for 30 minutes twice a day, she commits that hour into finding talent for our business, because that's the one thing that will drive our success. Now, for you guys, do you have a 30-minute sand timer hourglass that you're turning over every day to fix the problem that you're in, or are you going to stay stuck in the cycle of being too busy to ever really be successful?
I love it. There's that theme again, right? It's chipping away. It's not about this sprint to a finish line. It's really about systematically building a habit of chipping away at something is where these big investments actually take place. I love the image of just having a timer for 30 minutes or even 10 minutes. If you that's where you had to start, right? You could start making progress and getting closer to finding your coach, your mentor, your partner, or maybe that key employee that would be the one that could just help you get to the next level.
I think you have three important relationships in your life that you spend the most amount of your time with. The person you love, your honey bunny, your mattress, and the person that you spend the most amount of time with at work. And we definitely don't spend enough time picking the right mattress, and we invest a lot of time picking the right honey bunny in our life. But are we spending the same amount of time and effort making sure that the other 8 hours of our day is spent with the right person that could change your life in business?
Cool. Can you, just for my benefit, what was the quote that you led with there? Like when you make your life about the who instead of the what? I want to make sure I get it
Yep,
right.
exactly right. When you make your life about the who instead of the what, your potential becomes unlimited. If you're not hitting the results that you want, if you guys feel like you're hitting the ceiling, I promise you either don't have enough people or you don't have the right people around you.
Love it. And they don't have to be employees, right? These could be a partner. This could be a peer partner where you're holding each other accountable to do what you need to do. I think Gary said it,
Exactly.
our masterminds, if something's missing from your life, it's usually a relationship is missing from your life.
Yeah, could be your coach. Could be
Yeah.
as simple as that. But we need something to push us forward. And when you're talking about building wealth, people is such a huge part of it. Even more important than the opportunity. And when you look at venture capital companies, the ones that are down in San Francisco that are investing these millions and millions of dollars, they spend more time validating who it is they're investing in than what the idea is. Because the idea is a little bit irrelevant, or the idea itself can actually change over time and evolve into being something else, but the person you invest your money in doesn't.
Well, that's a good transition. So if we've talked about your big priority of giving and how that led you logically to make people a huge priority, you started in real estate. That's kind of where I jumped ahead, right? Your first investments were in real estate. How does like business, I mean, you've been in the news, you just acquired Active Rain, you've launched two businesses. Why do businesses show up, either building them or owning them or acquiring them? How does that become a huge priority on this really big journey?
I thought that when in 2000, whatever it was, started the 2000s, I thought that I was going to be a real estate investor because, well, they would give anybody a loan, even a cable guy. I could buy multiple properties. That was super cool, and that I would hit the wealth that I wanted to, get for my life. And what I realized was my ability to grow wealth in real estate was limited by my ability to have cash to pay cash or to get loans from the banks. And when the financial crisis happened, what I realized is the banks weren't along for my ride and my vision of being wealthy in real estate. So I had to find opportunities that weren't necessarily tied to it. And what I learned is the richest people in the world make their money by loaning money or buying businesses. Real estate actually wasn't listed there. And neither neither was having a job. So it was easy for me to transition from this corporation of working for, the cable companies and being laid off all the time, and they're always changing the compensation plans and et cetera. It was easy for me to move away from that. Real estate seemed easy because I thought that wealth was created through owning real estate and flipping real estate. Real estate for me has now become my 401k. It's my retirement. It's what I hold on to. I don't want to flip real estate. I want to keep it. But I'm limited. So my real opportunity comes by owning, starting, launching, buying, flipping, repairing, fixing businesses. And that's what I want to spend most of my time doing.
Well, that's clearly an area, and you've demonstrated the last few years where I think a lot of the skills you've developed in your journey are really all coming to bear. And I'll just make this comment because my wife and I started on this journey with real estate too. There's a reason if you read the stories about John Jacob Astor or whoever, like the Titans, a lot of them do start there and they continue to invest in real estate. But at some point, this business thing shows up. And it's exactly what you said. Investing in real estate is cash intensive, and unless you happen to be in a very specific niche, some part of commercial or some of the big residential games, which is, I think, a business more than a real estate investment, it doesn't generate the cash flow to continue allowing you to make those investments. So I just wanted to highlight kind of exactly what you said, what I was hearing at least, because I think that's a truth that a lot of people miss. So I would ask you this question. If you could go back in time, would you have jumped over real estate to get to business so you could get there faster? Or do you think that was is it a step that we all take because it's necessary or just because that's the path a lot of people follow?
Well, I still think it's, I'm a real estate investor at heart. So every 2 to 3 years, I buy a brand new property that I move into, and then I keep the one that I had before. And I think everybody on the call should be buying real estate every 2 years and then keeping it. Don't flip it, keep it. Because appreciation over time will show you at the end of your life you will have a solid retirement that outperforms the stock market and outperforms gold and outperforms all these other things. So I think you need to have a part of it, Jay. But if you want to come up with opportunities today, I think it might be easier to build a business like a real estate sales business or a real estate brokerage or a tech company or buy somebody else's business than it might be to try to jump in and try to do some complicated, very high-end real estate transaction because it requires too much capital.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about your journey in building businesses. You had a real estate sales business, you've owned brokerages, and recently you've actually just been going out and acquiring businesses. And I kind of wanted to touch on this because I feel like you and I are in the same masterminds. We hear some of the same economic talks. We know that the recession, right, happened. The recovery technically kind of has happened, and we're just counting the days until there's probably going to be another downturn. And that usually means there's an opportunity for people who are prepared to invest when the market is down. And businesses, that's on my radar. You did a lot of that in the past. Talk us a little bit. If you think about investing in businesses, what are the top priorities for you?
Okay. Businesses are awesome because like real estate, you make your money on the acquisition. You know that you're getting into an opportunity that would have a limited amount of time that you'd lose money and that there's an actual upside. When you think about the upside of real estate, the average cap rate in the U.S. might be 5% or 8%, and maybe you could improve that property and get another percent out of it, but you aren't going to get a 100% increase in rents or 300% or 400% increase in rents. Businesses give that to you. So what I'm looking for is business opportunities that I could invest in that because of the timing of the economy, I could take advantage of that, or because it hasn't been ran correctly, there wasn't accountability, there wasn't funds, or there wasn't the right person in charge, or they didn't have the tools. So there's something missing. And what's missing is something that I could bring to the table. So when I'm looking at these businesses, I got to say, it went inside my wheelhouse? And I stick to kind of a little tiny niche. And what I thought was interesting about these business deals is you don't have to be super wealthy to do these. And Jay, would it be okay if I gave you an example of one of the businesses that we purchased this year?
I would love it. I was trying to be polite and not necessarily ask specifically, but I'm dying with curiosity because it's your terms that I think are very enlightening if people envision it now or even in their future. It's really educational. So please share. I'd love to hear a case study.
So this is a smaller business. This isn't one of the bigger ones we purchased, but there's a small business, and this business has been owned by a gentleman for, let's say, since 1993, 25 years. And the business has been profitable. This person's lived, it's not a huge business. I'm going to use real numbers. This guy made $20,000 to $30,000 a year pre-expense on this business.
Okay.
And he'd been doing it for so long that he was ready to retire. 70-something-year-old guy, nice guy, has a wife. It's time for him to slow down. But nobody could afford to pay him what he needed for his family to feel like these amount of years that he invested in this little small business was worth it. So I met with him and said, would you like to sell? And he said, no. And I said, would you meet with me anyway? And he said, sure. And I sat down with him and I said, tell me about your business. And I complimented on it. And it was such a cool business. And I said, tell me why you wanted to sell, because I heard that you did. And he said, I want to slow down. And I said, tell me why you don't want to sell. And he said, well, I need to be able to survive. And what I asked him was, how much money do you need to actually survive? And he came up with a number, and it was about $800 a month. Well, the value of his business was probably $30,000 to $50,000 as is, and that's what people are willing to pay. What I did is I offered him $100,000 for his business. And I said, but here's the deal. I'm going to give you $800 a month for the next 10 years. And if you pass away or get sick or whatever, you can give that money to your wife, and you guys will always have this annuity of money coming in there. And I was able to accomplish his goal in a couple ways. Number one, he got the amount of money. If you take that $800 times 10 years is $100,000. He got the amount of money in his head that seemed like a win for him. He also got the amount of money. He got to go home to his wife and say, hey, we get to retire, and I'm going to get paid for the next 10 years, and we'll always have this extra amount of money that we needed. And what I got is I got a business opportunity that was making $20,000 to $30,000 a year, and I got to cut the expenses down and grow the income. So I was able to pay the gentleman with the increased income that I was able to make on the business. So that was a $0 out of my pocket deal that I was able to buy, acquire, and it benefited multiple different sources of my businesses. So you can think about structuring deals in such a way that it doesn't require money to do it. All it requires is somebody that takes the time to understand what is the win-win for everybody and how can you deliver that. So a lot of these business acquisitions I've done haven't even been about the money. Even the most recent one with, the large acquisition of Active Rain, it was about when I made my offer and everybody else was writing offers, I submitted mine without the price because the price was irrelevant. What I did was I listed the list of things that I thought would be important to a company that was worth $5 or $6 billion. And I just left the price out because if they agreed to all the other terms, they would come back to me and we'd be able to work out a fair number. And they did. They came back and said, we like your offer. We'd like to discuss the rest of the terms. And we were able to eliminate the rest of the buyers with never writing the price down. So structuring business deals can be an art, and it has to be about the win-win. What is the best thing for everybody?
What you're talking about, what's funny is this real estate investing is that's where we learned a lot of this too. There's price and then there's terms. And so people get so focused on both sides on the price that they forget to negotiate the terms. And sometimes the terms matter a lot more. And for you, because you focused on the terms in both these instances, you were able to get a price that allowed you to not have to leave with depleting your own savings. I think that's really cool. I've had the privilege of watching Gary do a number of investments, and this idea of purchasing an entity using the cash flows of that entity is absolutely how people at the top of the game play it. Now you're having to guarantee that, right? So for 10 years, you had to guarantee $800 a month. But if you feel competent to run that business and possibly grow that business, that's a pretty fair trade.
We just found another business and we made the same kind of offer, except for it was a bigger number. It was, we'll give you $1 million for your business, but we're willing to pay you $100,000 a year for 10 years. So what I knew in my head was that the first $100,000 of profit actually isn't profit. The business is a net zero for me unless I can make $101,000 a year in that business. So what you can do is just build it into your expense line as an additional expense for operating the business when you take it over. So you'll have to go and see what other expenses could I eliminate and what is my upside on how much additional income could I make so that I could actually make this deal happen. Because the value for me would be that I could double or triple that business in a couple of years, pay the guy back earlier than we thought, and high five and go do it again.
Cool. Well, I mean, out of curiosity, one of the questions that I just kind of saw out of the corner of my eye, and I was curious too when you were saying it, when you were imagining, what was the process when you were imagining this multi-billion dollar company? When you were thinking what's important to them, what was that process like? You don't have to share, right, what you found out necessarily, because that might, I don't know if you're at liberty, but how did you think that through, like to see it from their perspective? Is there anything you can help enlighten us on that?
You know, it's funny that people sometimes assume that people with a lot of money don't want to get rid of something. And I think that's a mistake. A lot of times people with a lot of money would like to simplify their life.
Hmm.
And what I realized, and specifically in the active rain purchase,
Right.
what was important to them was the owner of or the CEO of that company, Zillow, cared about the community, and his first blogging platform was on active rain, and he cared a lot about the community. So what he wanted to do was to make sure that that community was handed over to somebody that also cared about the community. So that was the first thing I led with. Well, the next thing that they wanted is they wanted to make sure that there was no technical drain on their company because they have bigger fish to fry. So the next line was, I'll make sure that it doesn't take any of your development resources and, you know, after the transition. And I showed them that we had a technical team to handle it. And then we just went through each one of those line items that we thought that would be important to them. We'll make sure that we'll honor the company and that we won't say anything bad, that we won't compete with them in certain areas, that we won't sell to another competitor that might be adverse to their best interest. And we came up with this big win-win. And funny enough, the finances just ended up being a mathematical equation of what is a business worth.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't have gotten to the table if I wouldn't have wrote an offer with no price on it, with a list of things that was more important to them than just money.
I love that. You know, it shows real insight into the process. And I can tell you in real estate investing, even on the beginner level, a lot of times the offer you make on a property, you know, it's not just about the price. It's about how long they get to stay there, when they have to move out. Like those same sorts of things. If you stop to think what's important to this individual besides price, and then you could just ask those questions. You know, is it important to you for these things? Those are really insightful terms that put you in their shoes so that you can kind of make a better offer. I like it. You got to the table and that allowed you to close the deal.
Back when I started my real estate investing piece of it, what I'd do is I'd say, worst case scenario, what is the upside of the property? And I had a rule. I could add square footage, so
Uh-huh.
I'd have to be able to remodel it and add square footage so it'd be worth more. I could short plat a lot off, so I would get a lot for free. I could condominiumize it, which means I could cut a duplex in half and make 2 condos. There was some additional value that other people weren't seeing in that business or in that real estate that made it an upside for me, which means worst case scenario, I was still ahead. Now, when one of the things I think we heard in Masterminds last time, Jay, was my confidence comes from my reserves and the people I have around me. And if you have strong reserves or a strong financial confidence in a real estate deal or in a business deal, and you have the right people to do it, you're going to move forward and not worry about it.
Love it. Well, we got about 15 minutes left in the hour, Ben. So I'm going to encourage everybody there. I've really, you know, it's really cool to hear you talk about the way you think at this high level. I'm going to ask you to kind of bring it back down to the start again, like give people, where do I start? But while you're thinking about maybe some advice you can give people to kind of start down this path if they haven't started it, I'm going to encourage everyone, if you've got a specific question for Ben, use the questions function and go ahead and type that in. And then we'll look at those questions here in a couple of minutes and we'll try to tackle as many of them as we can. So Ben, to kind of, I got 2 questions for you at the end. I'll do the other one after this one. Let's go back to the beginning again. You're selling cable. You kind of get this insight that, you know, you can make an investment that essentially pays for itself. And it's funny how that theme shows up all the way to businesses that essentially pay for themselves as they go. Where can people start? What's a good first step for people so that they could go to their calendars tonight and block some time to start building a habit to get them on this path?
Mm. So here's a couple of things when I think about what's allowed me to have these opportunities. One of them, Jay, is the fact that I run my business off of P&L and I keep reserves.
Okay.
So one of my rules in my business is whatever job I have or whatever, you know, business I'm running, I make sure that I have 4 months reserves in that bank account. Then I take whatever it costs me to live personally and I get 4 months of that put away in another bank account. And that means in the worst case scenario, the world's fallen apart, I would have 4 to 8 months to figure out how to get my business fixed. And then after that, that additional money is what I have left to invest with. So having reserves is the first step of being able to do some of these investments and start building your business. But you really wouldn't have a reserve if you weren't running your business correctly. And the only way to run your business correctly is to make sure you're bringing in the right type of talent. So what I would encourage people to do is, how much time are you spending reading about what does talent look like, how to hire people, how to recruit people, how to help people accomplish their goals, how to identify what people's real needs and desires are. Because once you can identify how you can help somebody accomplish their financial goals, their personal goals, their business goals, their health goals, and their relationship goals, they aren't going to go anywhere. Those people can't even be taken away from you, Jay. They're unrecruitable.
What's your favorite source of knowledge on talent? Is there a book out there that we can recommend to people, or a class they could take, or anything like that?
Well, most of us take a class called Recruit Select.
Yep.
But if that class isn't available in your industry or where you're at, what would be some of my favorite talent books? I don't know, Jay. I'd have to get back to
Okay.
some of those ones. I'm reading a ton of books right now. I get tired of reading leadership books because they all say the same thing. I think what I'm reading about right now is more questions about body language and telling the truth and asking great questions and getting to people's motivation. Because what I want to do is get to know the real person. So maybe some books like the FBI's Guide to Reading Body Language, or the CIA book You Can't Lie to Me, or some of these books, I think it's actually called Asking Great Questions. Some of these things that allow you to really get to know somebody in a fast amount of time.
What's cool about that is you got me to read the FBI guide, and I listened to the audio book and then read it, and it did help me, because one of the key things that happens when you're trying to identify talent is you've got to be able to interview them. So I love that. Start looking for great questions to ask, and looking for how to interact and develop rapport with people and read them. Those are great things. So I'm going to recap, and then I'm going to ask you one more question before we open it up. So I'm thinking that it begins with a focus on talent, right? If we're going to be business people, you have to have the discipline of having a budget, and that's your P&L, right? You're living within your budget to set aside to invest in talent and in future. You have reserves, right? 4 months personal, 4 months business. And then what we spend a lot of time talking about, it's not just focusing on price, it's focusing on the terms of the deal, a win-win deal that gets you to the table and helps you work everything out. That feel like a pretty good kind of narrow. Did I miss anything big?
No. I think once you're doing that, you get to the point where you're giving, and some of the the lessons we've learned from our mentors, Jay, has been about strategic giving.
Yeah.
And once you have enough money to give, you can give in such a way that your giving is actually marketing. And one of the things we've done locally is when there's a community event in our town, we make sure that if we wanted to sponsor it or donate to the food bank in that particular scenario, that our name is attached to it as the first couple words. So if you come to our town, the food truck rally is brought to you by my company. The outdoor cinemas for the community is brought to you by our company. The festivals, all these other events, we're donating our money to these charities like the food bank and to these different community events. And we're getting the marketing benefit from it too. So one of the cool things about giving money away is you get these other benefits to grow your business. And the nice thing is as your business grows, you can give more money away. So the cycle keeps going. And the more money you're giving away in the community, I think the type of people you can attract to your business and the type of people that come up to you and say, hey, we would like to be in business with you, I'd like to work for you, or I'd like to sell my business to you, just expands. So this is a cycle, and the circle just keeps going. Give, hire, buy businesses, invest in people, buy businesses, give more money away, and it just keeps going and going and going until you look up one day and you're accomplishing all your goals.
Cool. I love that, and it totally lines up with the one thing. Now, the purpose of your business is not about profit, right? That might be what makes it a business, but it's about the giving, and the people are attracted to that meaning, and all the research says the people who are working for something bigger than money work harder, work longer, are happier at work. It is a kind of a self-fulfilling cycle. So you have access to these questions too. I was going to ask you another one. I was just going to ask if I were to come back 5 years from now, Ben, and ask you, what would be like, what great benefit do you want to create in the world? Like if you keep growing on this trajectory, we're going to be talking about not millions, but billions. Do you have a sense of what you want to, your legacy will be on this journey?
Mm.
I know, I didn't warn you about that. I just put you right on the spot.
Well, I know that I have 5 goals for my life, or 6 goals for my life: to not do anything I don't enjoy, to have a business worth a certain amount, to have a certain amount of money saved in my bank account, to get married but only once, to create something that I'll be remembered for, and also to help 10 people become millionaires. I think what I'd encourage you guys to do is every time you meet me for the next couple of years, say, by the way, who are you helping make a millionaire? Because if I don't have those answers, I'm not living up to my promises, and I won't be held accountable. And I like being held accountable. But my opportunities in the future, I was looking at our net income that we're getting, is the things that we can buy next year we could have never have imagined this year, which
Yeah.
means I will have jobs and positions available for talent that I can't afford today next year. And if I'm going to have those sort of opportunities next year, what I need to start thinking about are who are the people that I'm in relationship with this year, and who are the people that I'm getting to know this year, so that when I have those big opportunities, I can afford them.
Cool. Well, it sounds like this goes back to the very beginning when we said if we could challenge people to think bigger about giving, give them a little instruction on how to give, then one of the legacies of this call could be kind of an echo effect of what you're building. And it sounds like right there under your own roof, if you teach people how to become millionaires the way you think millionaires should be, which is giving millionaires, then I think you're kind of saying that your legacy will be a legacy of giving through people. And that's a pretty cool one. You'll have to figure out how to say that really cool so we can get a tattoo or something for you.
Yeah, I need the Brian Gubernick ta-da at the ending of my vision statement. I'm going to write one as good as Brian Gubernick's, who's an amazing business person in the United States too. So that's my goal.
All right, so let's go back, and you have access to these questions. Let's see if we can pick out a couple here and answer some questions. Um, Real quick, can you repeat the FBI guidebook? I've had 3 questions on that. I think it's what everybody is saying. Is that correct?
The FBI's guide.
Yeah, it's what everybody is saying. Isn't that right?
It's called the FBI's Guide to Reading Body Language by Joe Navarro.
Okay.
And the other one is You Can't Lie to Me, and I forget her name. And I just read a question from Jennifer, and she said, is it a good idea to be a real estate professional? And what I want to say is that building a real estate sales business has been the foundation of my education, and I would say it's my master's degree in business. And what you'll notice about the way we run our businesses is we don't start one and then leave. We keep them going. So my sales business is still operating at its highest potential, and I expect it to grow. And then when I added on something else, buying brokerages, I expect that to grow. And when I got into tech, I didn't leave the first 2 things. I kept them all going. And the idea of selling businesses or flipping real estate and walking away from it just means you're walking away from opportunity. But my bread and butter, the thing that got me to where I'm at in my life and has been helping me to help all these people, is the fact that I chose a career that had a high income opportunity, real estate. And Jennifer, there isn't another career that I've seen that can help you get the wealth that you need to do the amazing things that you're potentially able to do than what you're doing in real estate. And I hope you stick with it.
I love that answer, Ben. And it's true. We did a study in our mastermind where the ability, just from a business, pure number sense, that people have to net cash flow from a real estate business is as good as just about anything out there. So it is a great way to kind of build your wealth and to finance all this other stuff. So I echo that. Let's see here. Let's go find another question. Anything jumping out at you? I've got one here. Someone's asking for you to share your 5 goals. Again, I know that you can rattle this off. Can you hit those for us one more time?
Yeah, for sure. Hire somebody to do all the things I don't enjoy. To have a business worth a certain amount of money, so my net worth, it's a net worth goal. To have a reserves goal, because I'm paranoid and insecure, so I need a certain amount of cash set aside for opportunities and for the market changes. To be married, but only once. To create something that I'll be remembered for long after I leave. I want to create a legacy, and to help at least 10 people become millionaires. And the reason I remember those is because they're written on my phone, and I tell people all the time. And the funny thing, Jay, about this conversation is when I say on the call to 1,000 business people that I want to help 10 people become millionaires, I'm not bragging, I'm lead generating.
Yeah.
I'm looking for people to apply for the job. And when you share goals like that, and I encourage all you guys to share these goals with your family and friends and the business people and employees, etc., what you'll realize is that people get on your bus, and it's your job to keep them there.
Love it. And we've actually had a couple of people chime in saying, can I be one of your millionaires? So I love that. What's the one thing, this is from Lisa, what's the one thing, if you recall, that you did when you first started in real estate, both personally and professionally at its most basic level? Do you remember what your one thing was back then at the very beginning?
You know what my one thing was back then? It's the same as my one thing now, is that every single day I need to spend a certain amount of my time doing the one activity that pays me the highest rate per hour. And that's always been lead generating. In the beginning, I was lead generating for buyer leads and seller leads, people that wanted to buy a house or people wanted to sell a house. Now what I'm doing is I'm lead generating for people that would like to find people to buy a house or find people to sell a house or find people to join a brokerage. The same thing happens for all you guys, no matter where you're at in the business. If you keep your focus on lead generation, your business will grow. In fact, I like to write the cliff notes of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, Jay, and I've read it so many times. It's actually on my nightstand next to the Bible, literally. I can show you a picture of it. Is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book to me means that you must incrementally remove yourself from the different aspects of the business based on its equivalent hourly rate. And what you taught me was you don't give up the highest dollar productive thing first, like listing appointments or something like that, just because you enjoy the internet or social media. I've always focused on the things that pay me the most, and then if I like doing something, teaching or social media or internet stuff, I did it after hours, or I did it on a day that I considered a day off.
Cool. Hey, Ben, if people want to reach out to you at benkinney.com on Twitter, if they have another question, is that okay if we invite them to, like, if they didn't get the question answered, that you'll try to answer it there?
Yeah, you guys can email me, benkinney@kidab.com, or you guys can hit me up on Twitter at Ben Kinney anytime.
Cool. And just a reminder for everyone, this is being recorded. We will email everyone the recording. Ben, I'm going to hand it over to Ian, and he'll walk people through a few final offerings and things that they can participate in and further go deeper into the system. But I want to thank you again for sharing your valuable time and some of the lessons you've learned on the journey. It was really great talking to you today.
Yeah, thanks for your friendship and your mentorship and all those other things, Jay. And you, by the way, are not the best fisherman. You're not the best shot.
I was waiting for that to come up.
You were the second best fisherman I've ever met. So that's the last word about that.
Okay.
Thank you guys for joining me today, and thanks for having me as a guest.
All right. Hey, Ian, this is Ian in our marketing department. He's going to take you all to the finish line. Ian?
All right, that was great. Thanks to Ben for such an interesting webinar. Definitely our most successful so far. Right here on the screen, you can see a link to get a free guide that we put together, the onething.com/financial wellness. Go there now and you can download this guide that we put together. And actually, one of the areas that the guide covers is building wealth. So it just follows up on the webinar. Again, the onething.com/financial wellness. Please take a survey. When we finish, you're gonna be offered a survey. Again, it helps us to improve our webinar, so we really value your feedback. Look for an email. Jay already mentioned that you will be getting an email. So within the next 2 days, you will get an email with a recording of this webinar, and also there will be a link to the document that I just offered. You can see there also a link if you are interested in checking out any of our other webinars. We have now 8 webinars there stored for you, and they're free, and you can go and listen to them on demand. Finally, our next webinar will be Thursday, August 27, same time, 3 p.m. Central Time. And to finish up, again, you can follow us on Twitter at The One Thing Book and at Jay Papasan. If you want to follow Ben and if you want to reach out to him and ask the questions that were not answered, reach out to him on Twitter at Ben Kinney. Continue the conversation with the hashtag The One Thing. And again, you can visit our website to learn more about The One Thing at theonething.com. We thank all of you for participating, and we will see you again next month. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. See you next month.